Hey guys, this is you. This is Tree Talks. I'm Yassine Bassem, and this is Ava, who got accepted into Columbia University. So can you give us a little introduction about yourself?
My name is Ava Di Giuseppe, and I'm a senior in high school from a small town in Pennsylvania. And I studied classical music in high school, and I'm planning to study politics and classics at Columbia.
Amazing. So, giving you your university, I'll guess you had some pretty high school stats. Can you give us your GPA?
Sure, I had a 3.95 unweighted GPA, and my school doesn't have a strict like what the cap for a weighted GPA is, but mine was a 4.4. And I took 11 APs in high school. I got fives and fours on them, and I had a 34 on the ACT.
Amazing. Okay, so what was your college list? So how did you decide which universities you were going to apply to?
So I applied restrictive early action to Princeton because I had a lot of people in my life who had gone there, and I thought that it would be a good school for me. And I got deferred because that process is very competitive. And I think, maybe this is useful information for people who are watching, but I think that universities that have the restrictive early action program tend to take a lot of athletes and also students who are legacies during that period. So if you get
Mhm.
deferred, I wouldn't be discouraged because it doesn't necessarily have to do with your candidacy or your stats. It might just be institutional needs. And I had always known that I was going to apply to Columbia because I really liked the idea of living in New York City. And I thought that it was a wonderful school. And I was familiar with a number of the professors who had worked there. So that was always going to be a top choice for me. But I did end up applying to all of the Ivy League schools just because a common trend in my regional area is that it's a good idea to apply to a lot of schools that have like an under 5% acceptance rate just because that's a guarantee absolutely nowhere.
Yeah.
And you know, I had a kind of a tumultuous application process. I also applied to schools in the UK. I applied to Oxford and St Andrews and Edinburgh. So just because I wanted to get some early acceptances and whatnot in just to kind of make myself feel better. But yeah, I ended up getting a likely letter from Columbia in early March. So that took a lot of the pressure off before Ivy Day when you get all of the decisions back. So they were mostly just aside from the Ivy League schools, small liberal arts colleges on the East Coast that were similar in nature, like Williams and Amherst and Swarthmore. So those kinds of schools.
Amazing. This is really unique. I've not yet to see like people a person from the US applying to the UK.
Yeah, I had dreamt of applying to Oxford since I was like 10 years old. So that was something that I wanted to do. They have, you know, when you're in the UK, you usually have to send in like your A-level scores, but you send in your
Yeah.
A-level scores after you take them. So after you've gotten your conditional offer, whatever. But I had the AP scores to apply, and I had done the entrance exam and interviewed and everything, and it was a good experience on the whole. So, and I wanted to do something that was rigorous and also something that was different from what my classmates were doing. So I would recommend that to other students in the US and also outside.
That's really amazing. So, did you use any resources to research colleges, so certain websites, counselors, or you just YouTube?
I had a lot of friends who used counselors. I did not. Most of my research was, well, I was an avid Reddit user. And I would go on the applying to college page and the chance me pages and stuff. I don't recommend that. It's so toxic. And people are so mean on there and they don't know you, so they can't really evaluate you. We had a wonderful counselor at my school who is just like most schools have them. It's just the person who kind of coordinates sending documents and whatnot. She was the only person that I worked with, and she was absolutely wonderful. And she knew me very well because I go to a small Catholic all-girls school, so it's a familial community. But yeah, she knew me very well. She knew the kinds of schools I wanted to apply to. She knew where she thought I would be successful. So that's the path that I would take, try and find someone who knows you pretty well. I wouldn't not suggest using an external college counselor if that's the kind of person for you. I just didn't really want someone in my ear telling me what I had to send to schools and what I shouldn't send to schools because I just wanted to send things that I thought were authentic. but I was so bad. I didn't have anyone look at my essays because I would kind of procrastinated doing them. Because I applied to a lot of schools that had essays, and I wanted to spend a lot of I consider writing one of my strengths, so I wanted to spend some good time working on them. And, my mom was, like, badgering me that she had to read my essays and whatnot, and I knew she was gonna criticize them, so I was like, "Stop, I'm not showing you my essay." But, no, aside from that, it was mostly just my school counselor and just the university websites themselves, and at the beginning, Reddit, but honestly, I would not recommend doing that.
Yeah, amazing. Uh, okay. So when did you start preparing for everything? You mentioned you start late for your essays, but for like the whole application thingy, when did you start and how did you organize your time?
When did I start doing, like, the formal applications?
Yeah, like the general starting to like research college stuff.
Okay, so I come from an area where lots of students are going to top school, so that was always something that was important to me, and, I started thinking about what school I wanted to go to when I was in middle school. Um, and for in the US, that's like grades 6, 7, and 8, ages 11, 12, and 13. So, I think a lot of kids start thinking about it pretty early. I started working on the formal applications when they came out in August, and I gave myself like a week each to work on. For each of the Ivy League schools, I spent a week each on them, just writing essays, doing research, and whatnot. For some of the schools that I was like, okay, I'm not as gung ho about this, but I'm just going to send in an application, I spent maybe like 3 or 4 days working on them. So, you just have to sort of prioritize which schools are going to be the most important to you because you're going to have to divide your time at some point. You can't spend equal time on all of them. And even within the Ivy League or if you're applying to STEM schools and stuff, there are some that you're going to want to go to more than others. So if you need to allocate your time in that way, I don't think there's anything wrong with that.
So do you have your personal statements on you?
I can look for it right now.
Okay.
Okay. I titled it The Bildungsroman List. Pangloss taught metaphysico-theologico-cosmonegology. He could prove to wonderful effect that there is no effect without cause, and that's a quote from Voltaire's Candide. Ah, Dr. Pangloss, the tutor of Candide, the painful optimist, the arbiter of reason, my hero. Voltaire's Candide, a quintessential Bildungsroman, explores the philosophical journey of its protagonist, mirroring my own quest for enlightenment. I've always aspired to be like Dr. Pangloss because I wanted to learn as much as I could about the world around me, but what was this need driven by? As my favorite literary genre in childhood, the Bildungsroman captivated me with its promise of enlightenment, the transformation of a youth from traditionalist to transcendentalist. As a student who believed that creative and intellectual enlightenment could only be achieved through discipline, I sought to bring about my own metamorphosis within the confines of a strategically organized series of works, the Bildungsroman list. The Bildungsroman list, which I began to develop prior to entering high school, is composed of a series of works selected on a seasonal basis that align with my curricular and creative pursuits. By developing the Bildungsroman list in accordance with my intellectual curiosities, I've ultimately achieved the enlightenment that I sought in youth. Sorry for that text
No.
message. Initially, studying this list seemed to be a self-serving activity. I was learning as much as I could, but at the cost of practical application. Although the realization wasn't immediate, I came to the understanding that my acquisition of knowledge should serve both me and my communities. So I set out to organize 3 initiatives: Equity, Everyone for Quality and Inclusive Teaching for Youth, the Academy of Notre Dame Coffee Company, and the Great Book Society. Through my initiatives that each target different aspects of student empowerment, I transform my intellectual curiosity into practical action. Equity focuses on creating a network of student-led chapters advocating for equitable educational policies at the congressional level, working to engage students in public policy and legislative action. Meanwhile, its sister initiative, ND Coffee, funds critical educational programs in underserved communities by selling coffee on campus, simultaneously targeting student demand and teaching youths about educational policy. Driven by my love for literature and my commitment to preserving the humanities, developing the Great Book Society has been one of my most rewarding projects. As a dynamic reading curriculum adopted by libraries across the nation, it has offered the opportunity to shape educational experiences in curricular and extracurricular settings. While I've enjoyed creating the annual curriculum and working with librarians and educators to select resources, the most fulfilling aspect of the development stage has been fostering a space in which enthusiastic students from across the nation may engage with each other on a mature intellectual level, sparking nuanced discussions and cultivating a shared passion for literature. As a student who has studied within small single-sex environments for the majority of my educational career, I've developed a true appreciation for the merits of educational programs that focus on the growth and development of the individual. In childhood, I even dreamed of opening an all-girls school after I retire, and truthfully, it's a dream that I've yet to suppress. However, I realize there is still much to do before I reach that age. So within my school community, I've taken on leadership positions in spheres that empower young women to share and develop original ideas, the hallmark of my personal definition of achievement. I intend to spend my senior year developing a thesis that focuses on the importance of women's education, particularly in our contemporary world. Thus, the Bildungsroman list has not only represented the arc of my intellectual journey, but has also acted as a foundation for my future endeavors. The genre's promotion of uniting classical principles and contemporary insights will continue to shape my educational philosophies as an academic and inform my efforts as an aspiring civil rights attorney and judge.
This and your voice is so soothing. So that's
Thank you.
amazing. I like that, like the style. Like it's not a like a story, or like you're not narrating something. You like straight telling points, but it's like really amazing.
Yeah, thank you very much. And something that I noticed when Um, we had a composition course in my junior year of high school, so the year before I was applying to
Yeah,
schools, when we all were working on our personal statements together. And something that I noticed a lot of students were doing was they were doing that kind of narrative arc thing, and it annoyed me
yeah,
because I was like, okay, you're kind of pulling this random fact from childhood that like
yeah.
isn't really relevant to your current life, and it just doesn't make any sense. It doesn't relate to what you want to do in the future. So I think that's a good point that I would make for a lot of students with their personal statements. Make it really future centric, like what you're intending to do at whatever university you'd attend, instead of just here's here's what I have done, here's why I'm amazing, and that's the end. Like, I think they're looking for something that's, what are you going to do once you get here?
I mean, this is like a really, really unique point.
Yeah.
I've yet to see like a person like advocate this like thing in a personal statement.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. Thank you.
Amazing. Okay. So, how about your supplementals? How did you approach your supplementals?
Well, do you want me to read the Columbia ones?
Yeah, that'd be perfect if you can.
Okay, this is my notes document that I used to organize my supplementals and all of my information, so it looks not pretty.
That's amazing.
But
Uh,
it's all right. So,
okay.
this first supplemental they have that's about, I might have there are some schools that have the same supplementals, and they say that, if they have the same essay, you can reuse it and stuff. So this might have
Yeah.
been one that I used for another school, but something to take note of to save time.
Yeah.
And this is just about I applied as a politics and a classics major. So this was about how I had taken a lot of the national, this is asking for, what kind of national exams that you've taken. If you're an international student, you'll probably, these are like, they're really asking you for these questions because we don't have a lot of them here unless you're doing the math Olympiad or the science Olympiad or something like that.
Mhm.
But I had just taken the foreign language exams for Latin and I had done very well on them. So I got to write about that here. I was also a Latin tutor when I was in high school. So I wrote about instructing other students in their preparation for that exam.
Amazing. Personal question. Why Latin though?
I'm interested in becoming a professor of constitutional law. And I think there's so much to be learned from studying Latin and Greek texts, especially from a rhetorical standpoint. So I wanted to combine that with, the practical politics major. That was more so to feed my own intellectual curiosities. And I think that Columbia has a particularly amazing classics program and also a particularly wonderful law school and liberal arts education. So that's something I'm interested in pursuing there.
Yeah, that's really unique. Yeah, like you have like some of the most unique features I've seen, to be honest. Like
Oh, well,
I've seen people like amazing intellectual curiosities. Like I've interviewed someone who worked with a astrophysics scientist, I think,
Oh, yeah,
if I
interesting.
remember, yeah, from Caltech. And I've like interviewed a lot of people, but you're like one of the unique ones.
Oh, well, thank you very much. This was, I mean, it, you might find this interesting then. This is an essay that Columbia had that really solidified my love for them. They ask you to list a selection of texts, resources, and outlets that have contributed to your intellectual development outside of academic courses, including but not limited to books, journals, websites, podcasts, essays, plays, presentations, videos, museums, and other content that you enjoy, 100 words or fewer. So you can just go on a big list of all the things that you like to do and study outside of school. And if you're a person who, studied outside of the US, or at least I know from the UK application process where they want you to, um, be engaging with your subject a lot outside of school, you know, I had experience with that. So I was ready to just rattle off this list of like
Mm.
books that I liked and music that I had studied and poetry that I'd read and places that I've been and, different arts related things that I'd engaged with. Now, I have a huge appreciation for the arts and reading and literature and everything. So this was easy for me to come at it from that angle. But I think if you're a person who's STEM oriented, there's absolutely a way to engage with that too. You would just discuss the books and the publications and the presentations and things that you've seen and like natural science museums you've been to and stuff like that. So, I think that there are a few ways to come at that. But this just was touching because I got to talk about a lot of the things that I really liked. Um, okay, this is one of the community prompts. This was an essay that I wrote this essay a few different like all of the schools have community prompts and I'd written this
Mm.
essay a few different times, but I did rewrite it for Columbia, and this was about how I had a really strong relationship with my elementary school librarian. And I was kind of different when I was in elementary school because I liked reading and stuff and everyone thought I was weird.
Yeah.
um but I made a great friend when I was in high school, and her name was Sarah, and she taught me a lot about, being okay with yourself and, having interests that are go against the grain. So I got to write a little bit about our relationship, and that I think contributed. I The point of the essay was that I wanted to be like Sarah for other students at Columbia who are maybe coming into their own or are not completely comfortable with themselves, and that I wanted to be able to provide a community space for other students.
That's really it's really personal, and I kind of like that. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, this one.
Oh,
Oh,
sure.
okay. This was about we had a new choir director at my school, and without going into too much detail about him because we now have a good relationship. He was a young teacher who came in who was an extremely talented musician, and he had sort of, was learning. I come from a competitive high school, and he was sort of becoming accustomed to that environment. And he had said something to a group of students like, "Oh, well, I didn't take advanced math when I was in high school." And I don't think this is how he meant it, but at the time, because I didn't really like him, I took it
Mm.
as, "Oh, he's saying that he doesn't want other students to be taking advanced math classes if they don't need to." And I just wrote about how I responded to that and how I thought that that was, you know, anti-intellectual curiosity. Um, and he said it in front of a group of students that I was tutoring in calculus. Anyways,
Oh,
yeah, I hope he doesn't come across this at any point in time. Anyway, this was about why Columbia. And I talked a lot about this is kind of what I've said about Columbia previously in this interview, but I really
mhm.
like the core curriculum and I love its emphasis on giving a holistic liberal arts education. I talked specifically about things I was interested in doing in the classics department, and I also talked about how excited I was to be moving to New York City, mostly because of, your proximity to museums and arts exhibitions and, all of the wonderful opportunity. That was the angle that I came at it from, but I think, be going to Columbia means going to New York City. And, no matter what subject you're interested in or what career you want to have, the opportunity there is just absolutely endless. So I think there are lots of different things you could say. If your truth is that you want to work at a major law firm or you want to work at Goldman Sachs or something like that, that's a mecca for that kind of stuff. So
Hmm.
I think, there are multiple ways to come at
Yeah.
that.
I mean, as an international, when I think about like politics in the US, all I think is like New York. I don't think like Washington, D.C. Like I think yeah, it's all New York.
Exactly. And the school that I was between when I was deciding was either Columbia or Georgetown, which is in Washington, D.C. And Georgetown is an absolutely wonderful school. But the reason that I chose Columbia was because I felt like, surprisingly, there was more opportunity in politics in New York City just because,
Yeah.
of all the companies that are there and all the politicians that are there. I mean, Hillary Clinton is on faculty right now at Columbia in one of the graduate schools. Like it's just crazy. That's not to say that Georgetown doesn't have wonderful faculty. They have some really cool professors if you're interested in working in different government sectors. Um, okay, and this is just why are you interested in studying at Columbia College or Columbia Engineering? Columbia, unlike other undergraduate institutions, well, actually, I think Princeton does this too. They either have you're studying at like the college that just has all of the majors except for engineering or the engineering school because there are so many engineering students. So I
Yeah.
just talked about, why I was interested in studying the liberal arts and the subjects that I was interested in and how I thought that there was a lot of flexibility within the college. But if you're studying engineering, you can of course talk about why you like engineering, why you think Columbia is a good school to study engineering at, that kind of stuff. So those are all my supplementals.
That's really amazing. Okay. So, what unique angle do you think like make you stand out when you write?
I think I have a very stream of consciousness style of writing, and it's one that I've honed a lot, and I practice writing in my own style often. Um, I would say that the most important thing is to just, I know this is really cliche advice, but just to write in a way that's very authentic to who you are and to what you sound like. And I was told that a number of times when I was writing essay drafts, and I write and speak like not how a teenager speaks. And I
Yeah,
was a lot of teachers and other people I had who wanted to look at my essays and stuff would say that, oh, you need to adopt a younger voice or tone or whatever.
I
But I
can
was
relate.
like,
Yeah.
yeah. And I was like, no, I don't care if I write like a 50-year-old man if that's what I really wanted to say. So I would say, whatever you think sounds most authentically you is definitely the path to take because the university will be able to identify exactly who you are and they'll be able to decide whether or not you're a good fit for their community because it's a two-way street. I know lots of kids really think that they want to go to XYZ school. Like I really wanted to go to Princeton. But looking back on it now, if I were in my position right now and I were going to Princeton, I would probably not be that excited because I think it's super intense there.
Yeah.
um, not to say that it's not intense at Columbia, it's just a different kind of intensity. So I think not knocking Princeton though, wonderful school. Um, I think it just depends on what your preferences are, and I think the university is able to tell whether or not you're going to be a student who will thrive in their community. So I would trust their admissions instincts, but I think the best way to get that desired outcome is to write like exactly who you are.
Amazing. So, as like as for most students and specifically international students, how would you recommend them to learn how to write and practice how to write? So, let's say they have 1 year till they apply to college.
Are they taking a lot of writing courses in school?
Probably not for international students.
Interesting, interesting. So yeah, I mean, I guess that would be the case. Something that I did when I was in high school, regardless of whether or not I was taking writing courses that were rigorous, was that I would journal every night. And even if it's sometimes I would give myself expository writing prompts just to kind of get my brain flowing because I always knew that writing was something I wanted to continue. And I was like the editor of the newspaper and stuff at my school. So, and I was always one of the top English students. So it was something that was important to me to continue honing that skill. But I would give myself prompts every evening. Like you can find them online. I'm sure, you can generate them with AI or something. Like give me a prompt to write about. But I would mostly just write about my day and experiences that I had and how I dealt with them. And it taught me a lot about how to write like myself and also just how to write properly. I would suggest, though, if you're interested in learning how to become a good essay writer, pursuing those like essay contests, particularly ones like the John Locke essay contest and also there are some publications that you can apply for, one slipping my mind, the Concord Review. Those kinds of pages will give you a lot of information about how to write a good formal essay, like the ones that you'll be writing once you get to college, and also, give you the research skills and the formal writing skills. But these kinds of college essays are not formal writing. It's really just finding how to write like the kind of person that you are. So I would suggest the journaling thing. That's what I did at least.
Amazing. The one AI prompting and stuff. This is actually really good. Like
Yeah.
now that I think about it, practicing every night with like a prompt for a year, that would make you
Yeah.
like perfect.
Oh, yeah, yeah, exactly. And I mean, there is like the great thing about writing is that you keep practicing and you keep getting better and you keep learning new things about your writing style, so it was a fun exercise for me. And I actually talked about that, I think, in one of my Columbia essays. But it's also a good emotional exercise. If you just need someone to talk to, it can be yourself.
Yeah. That's amazing. Can we jump to your extracurriculars? What were some of like the most impactful extracurriculars you had?
Yeah, I think that the extracurricular that I ranked number one was that I studied at a pre-college program and I studied opera. And it was at one of the major US conservatories. So that took up a lot of my time, not just with going there and studying, but also practicing. And, it's a voice program. So you're also studying language and, doing like extra recitals and maybe doing competitions and stuff. So
Hmm?
that was, sorry.
No, I was not saying things. I think my mic
Okay,
is bad today.
no worries. That was my number one extracurricular. And then I had framed a lot of my application around educational equity and politics. So I had interned with my congressional representative over the summer and during the school year. So I wrote a little bit about that, and I had also started, as I mentioned in my essay, a few initiatives at my school and in my community, and I was able to write about those as well, but they were all related to the issue of educational equity. I live near the Philadelphia area, and there's just such a disparity between the suburbs and the inner city, just in terms of income and access to adequate educational opportunities. So that was something that was important to me, that I was able to build a narrative around. Also, all of my grandparents were teachers, so that was a good narrative to have, and it's something that I am passionate about and want to continue doing in college. And a few of the initiatives that I started, like the Great Book Society, that's something that I'll be able to continue and expand when I'm in college. So I think that's another thing I'd suggest: starting a project that's related to one of your interests that is something that you can carry into college with you. And then a number of the other extracurriculars were school-based leadership positions. I was one of the captains of the Quiz Bowl team. I was the editor of the newspaper. I was one of the captains of the Model UN team, and we did an inaugural conference at my school that year. So those kinds of stuff. I was the president of the Classics Society at my school, stuff like that.
Amazing. Okay, so do you have any advice for students who feel that like their extracurriculars aren't enough?
I felt that way.
Yeah.
I The advice that my mom gave me when I was very young was that I had to find one thing that I could be really good at and just absolutely go with it, and then find some other things to sprinkle around it. So for me, that was music. And, I submitted art supplements too. And I think
Mhm.
that there are a lot of students whose thing is music. But really, like, your thing can be anything. Your thing could be Model UN or writing for the newspaper. If it's like you do all kinds of competitions and you just put yourself out there and you've got like a national award or something. And I think like having the one thing will really give you a spike. But also, you know, I kind of felt like my extracurriculars weren't all that initially, but I became comfortable with them because I was comfortable that I thought they were authentic. And also, they were things that I had put a lot of time and energy into. And also, just look at what kids in your area who've been successful have done and try and take inspiration from them. You don't have to do exactly what they did because everyone's their own person, but see what they've done. And I think that was something that helped me a lot. I tried to look at different opportunities that girls from my school who had gone to top universities had taken, and I tried to find similar things or find opportunities that were of a similar caliber. So that's what I would suggest. But if you're start earlier rather than later doing that, I think that by the time you get to the summer before you're applying, probably game over.
Yeah. Amazing. So you had letters of rec, right?
I did.
Okay. So who wrote your letters of recommendation and why did you choose them specifically?
So there were some schools where you could submit three teacher letters of recommendation, and for those ones, I did do the three teacher letters. And I had my AP United States history teacher. I had a very small class, and I had the highest grade in the class, so that was a given. I also
Mhm.
chose my Latin teacher, who had taught me for 7 years, and I had a very strong relationship with her as well. And I chose my 11th grade English teacher, who also knew me very well as I was the editor of the newspaper. So I would choose teachers that are able to speak to. I think finding a teacher that can speak to your writing ability is important because writing is such an important skill in school, and also teachers that can speak to your subject specific abilities. And that's what I did there. I also had two additional letters of recommendation. Actually, I had three for some schools. One was with a convent that I had volunteered at throughout high school, and it was the Mother Superior at the convent. The other one
Mhm.
was from the congressional representative, and the other one was from my professor of music at the conservatory.
Okay, amazing. So, did you provide any like guidance or materials, brag sheets or any thing of this sort?
You have a required counselor letter of recommendation. My counselor had our families do a brag sheet for them. I did,
Mhm.
for the congressional representative, I did provide a brag sheet, but mostly because some of the work that I did wasn't directly with her and it was stuff that I'd want her to know about.
Mhm.
Um, but for the other teachers and recommenders, they were people who knew me, so it wasn't necessary for me to provide a brag sheet, especially because they were familiar with what I was doing at school. But I think if you're coming from a much bigger school or you're working with individuals who don't know you as well, it's good to provide some additional information just with, you know, what extracurriculars you're most passionate about, what the narrative of your application is, that helps so that you have something that's cohesive.
Amazing. So, if someone doesn't have much time to prepare for college, let's say that they started late for some reason, uh, how big of a thing would you recommend? Well, like, would you put letters of rec? So, if you had to like sort from like 10 to like one, what are like the most important things? That's like one is extracurriculars, two is like essays and stuff.
The number one most important thing are your stats, so your GPA and your SAT
Mm-hmm.
or ACT. That gets you into the into the running.
Yeah.
Then I think that's like the base level, what you need to have. Then I think your extracurriculars and the narrative arc that you're presenting is the second most important thing. Then I would say like the essays in your application to this school are probably the next most important, and then I would put the recommendation letters because the recommendation letters really just exist. It's kind of like on par with if you have to do an interview, which I did not have to for Columbia. They don't have interviews anymore. But
Yeah.
if you're, it more so gives the school security that you've been honest and are actually passionate about the things that you've written about. So it just gives some credibility.
Yeah, I like to ask this question to like different like college students because MIT students put it number one. Multiple MIT students said it's number one, and they have like
Oh,
a kind of fad around MIT that if it's not in the letters of rec, you didn't do it.
oh, yeah.
Yeah, because like
Yeah.
at MIT, I believe they don't even have a personal statement. So
Oh, wow. Yeah.
yeah,
No, I would, I, maybe that's true at MIT. I don't,
yeah,
I don't really think that that's super true. I mean, I haven't seen what my recommenders wrote about me, but a lot of my extracurriculars were related to activities that I had been involved in that they knew about. So they might have written about them, they might not have, but I don't think that I don't think that's really true that if it's not in the letter, it didn't happen. Like
yeah.
I think if you're able to discuss it in an interview or something, if it's something that's really important to you, that gives it credibility too.
Amazing. I really like to ask like such questions that like give like a different map of different colleges, how they
Mhm.
think. It's really
Yeah,
amazing. Okay. Uh, okay. So you mentioned you didn't do an interview for Columbia, right?
I did not.
So did you do any other interviews?
Yeah, I had one at Harvard, I had one at Oxford, I had Princeton, Dartmouth, Duke, UPenn. Um, I think I had a few that I had to sign up for. Like there was one, Gettysburg College was one of my like safety schools that I did an interview for. I also did one at Holy Cross. I did one at Swarthmore College. I think that's it. But
Amazing.
yeah,
So
I did a
yeah.
lot
So
of
how did you prepare for them?
Each of them were different. I mean, I won't discuss the Oxford interview too much because there are many videos that you can find on the internet about those, and
Yeah.
they're extremely intensive and not related to the US application process at all. But
Hmm.
for um for all of the other schools, I made a sheet and I thought of the questions that they would ask. So I did a section for questions I thought they'd ask about me and my application and questions I thought they'd ask about the university. So for the part that was about me, it was standard for all of them and it was just, usually an interview starts with who are you, which is a really difficult question to answer. But
Yeah.
to just have a sentence that you can have memorized and you can just rattle off about who you are, the key things that you're interested in, and what you want to study, that's good to have, and just be able to say that immediately. Also, I then had follow up questions I thought they would ask, like, why do you want to study classics? Why do you want to study political science? Why did you engage in this extracurricular activity? What is it? Tell me more. So I had prepared for all of those just so I could have something that was concise and I wasn't sitting there thinking, gosh, what do I say about it? When it's something that is super important to me. And it's also, if you're a person who's really engaged with your extracurriculars and you have so much to say, it can be difficult because you're sitting there thinking, oh God, well, what are just the key things that I can rattle off for them right now?
Yeah.
Um, Also, for the part that was about the university, the question that they're going to ask you without a doubt is why X university. So I had an answer for that. And then also, if there were professors that I was familiar with, or I knew through someone, or I had read, I would try and discuss them, especially if they were in my areas of subject interest. Also, just programs and opportunities that I knew they had at the school that I was interested in engaging with. So those kinds of questions, like what are you going to do when you get there?
Amazing. So you mentioned like the why us or like why X University question, and this is actually really good. I want you to like, touch on that more. How do you demonstrate interest in a way that is unique to every college?
That's interesting. Well, I did not do a lot of demonstrated interest stuff at the Ivy League schools because I figured that sending Columbia a bunch of emails that I really wanted to go there wasn't going to change the fact
Yeah.
because it's given everyone wants to go there if they applied there. Um, so I would not suggest that route, but something that I did for every school I applied to was over Christmas break, I sent a bunch of update stuff into my supplement. So I wrote a letter to the admissions committee about things that I had done over the beginning of the school year. I also added some additional portfolios that I'm involved in two scholar programs at school, and we have to make portfolios for them just for, writing that we're doing and opportunities that we're engaging in through the program. So I submitted those two portfolios, a few writing pieces that I'd submitted for competitions that I was particularly proud of that I thought they'd want to see. So that kind of stuff. No one had advised me to do that. I don't even know if it was a good thing, but I did do it, and I guess it helped me. But
Yeah.
yeah, I think that's a good way to demonstrate interest and to show the school that you are, you still care and you're still going and you didn't just drop out in your final year of school. But I think if you're a person who cares about school specific demonstrated interest, I think reaching out to your regional admissions officer and sending them, questions that you might have and stuff like that is probably the most effective way to do it, although it's not necessarily what I'd suggest because those schools don't take demonstrated interest into account for a reason. They assume that you're interested.
Yeah, amazing. Okay, so that section I like the most. What is something you wish you had done differently in your application? So if you can point at like a certain point in your application and just like delete it or change it, what would it be?
I wish I took the ACT again.
Why?
um, I if I was able to submit a 35, like even as a super score, it would have given me a lot more comfort.
I mean, 34 is pretty good.
Sorry, what did you say?
A 34 is pretty good.
It is, but it was just, whenever I had tried to assess it and I was like, well, I'm in the 25th percentile, that doesn't feel so great. So I think that's probably the key thing that I would have changed. But honestly, I did spend a lot of time on my applications and put a lot of energy into them. So there aren't, I thought that I submitted something that was authentically me. I also would have changed the B plus that I got in my freshman year in my honors algebra 2 trig class. That really haunted me for a long time.
Is that what changed it from a 4.0, right? To like a 3.95, you said?
Yes, that's why I have a 3.95.
Yeah. Uh, Amazing. That's also really unique. So you wouldn't touch the essays or like the supplementals, extracurriculars, you wouldn't touch those, right?
No, no, I think that I submitted things that I was proud of and happy with.
Amazing. Okay. So I would guess you reviewed some applications, right?
Sorry, what did you say?
I would guess you reviewed some applications of future applicants.
Oh,
Like, yeah. So what are some of the common mistakes you saw applicants make, and how do you think they should avoid them?
I think falling into the trap of trying to do something that's very conventional and presenting a narrative that's not, uniquely you. I think that that's a very common trap that students fall into. And also, this is just for your own emotional well-being, but falling into the comparison trap is so easy, especially if you're on those pages like Reddit or College Confidential. It's so easy to look at other people who are also applying for your major or something, especially if you're going into engineering or computer science and like your opportunity, there are very objective metrics that you can measure yourself against for other students. Like, if you're doing the math Olympiad or something like that, there's a score versus a score, and
Yeah.
that's it's an objective metric. But I would suggest not looking at that stuff. And also, objective metrics only matters so much. It's really about who you are as a collective and the other things that you're engaging in. I would definitely suggest working on a few personal projects that you can carry with you into college. That's not something that I saw every applicant doing, but it's something that I've seen a lot of successful applicants and students who are successful in college doing.
Amazing. if you can give one piece of advice to your past self during the application process, what would it be?
Um, I would have told her to get over the ACT and the B plus thing. Like there are always going to be these little things that you really want to change, but like you just got to go with it and trust yourself at some point, and you know, not worry too much. And also, it really is your undergrad career is not the end of your life. I know that there are some people who are very happy with their college decisions and very unhappy with their college decisions, but I think that what you do for your undergrad is not the end all be all. Most people, well, I don't want to say most people, but a lot of people do go to grad school or a professional school. And and if they're not, they're still able to excel wherever they are and follow the same path that they would have had they gone to another school. So I would suggest not to treat it like it is the absolute end of the world because it isn't.
Oh, this is really really motivational. Okay, so transition to your college life. How has Colombia been?
I am not at Columbia yet. I just
Oh,
recently got
sorry, yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah.
Then, I forgot about that. Okay. Okay, so I'm gonna go to the advice section. What is the best general advice you have for students that are applying generally or to a US universities in specific?
You mean for international students?
I mean any students, but yeah, majorly internationals.
Okay, I would say if you have the opportunity to visit a campus, I would suggest that because it'll, you know, give you a little bit of the flavor of what that kind of college experience is like, and also try and acclimate yourself to it and, become very familiar with the university, look at its websites, look at even things like there are a few students that I've spoken to and I asked about like what the requirements are to graduate to their university and they might be going to the university and they're not sure yet. That's definitely something that you want to look into. Because like if you're a person who doesn't like the humanities or doesn't like reading and writing, you might not have a great time at Columbia because they're very passionate about their core curriculum and that's completely fine. It's not for everyone. But there are some universities like Brown where they have no requirements at all, and maybe that's perfect for you and you love that. Or that might be like, oh, I don't know what I'd do with all of that freedom. I think I want a little more structure. So definitely familiarize yourself a lot with the university that you're applying to and why.
Amazing. So to wrap up, do you have any final words of encouragement for students who might be feeling discouraged right now?
Well, I'll acknowledge that it is outlandishly competitive and it's disappointing. But I think that, like I've been saying throughout this interview, I think if you present something that's really authentic, you should be at peace with being proud of it and shouldn't fall too much into the comparison game. And I was fortunate to have been able to get off of those online platforms after I submitted my applications. So I would just suggest submitting something that you feel is very authentic and that you're proud of.
That's really amazing. This was a really, really good interview. I really liked it.
Oh, thank you very much. It was very fun to talk to you.
Amazing. So this was Street Talks. Can we do a meeting in 1 year and see what are the differences are?
Sure. I'll
Amazing.
have to I'll have to see what my life looks like then, but I'd be happy to.
Amazing. So this is Street Talks. This was Yassine Bassem and Ava from Colombia. So see you next time.